Hello, grade 9 students. This is teacher Felisa. Welcome to our English class. Before we start, be sure to have these following materials with you: your book, your pen, and your notebook. Please open your literary companion book on pages 242 to 243 because we are going to have a figurative language lesson. Our objectives for today: give the characteristics of figurative language, enumerate and discuss some of the figurative languages, and identify figurative languages used in poems. Alright, so let's get started. What is a figurative language? It is a language that is not meant to be taken literally. So let's discuss one of the figurative languages that is used on the previous poems that we've read. It is your imagery. So what is imagery? It is a form of figurative language that draws upon the five senses: sound, sight, smell, touch, and taste. Now, when you analyze figurative language such as this imagery, you have to look for ways that it enhances your understanding of the poem's message or tone. Now, in the poem written by Archibald MacLeish, Ars Poetica, he uses imagery in the form of a series of similes to describe what he believes is the function of a poem. What are similes? These are comparisons between two things or two objects using like or as. Now, let's take these examples from the poem. A poem should be wordless as the flight of birds. Now, what is the imagery described here? It compares a poem to birds in silent flight. And the speaker's message is: a poem should feel natural and free and not have to convey meaning. Another example: a poem should be palpable and mute as a globed fruit. The imagery described here is: it compares a poem to a piece of mute fruit that you can touch and feel. And the speaker's message is: a poem should be so real it is wordless, like a common object you can hold in your hand. Now, the imagery in this poem helps show how poetry does not have to communicate a message. It is enough for a poem to exist, just like birds in flight or a piece of fruit. Usually, class, the author's choice of words and details also conveys that author's tone. Now, let's try to read this chart comparing the tones of Shakespeare at School by Cope and Ars Poetica by MacLeish. Okay, so I picture Shakespeare sitting near the back, indulging in a risky bit of fun. Now, the details here are: I picture Shakespeare sitting near the back, a risky bit of fun. Next, what is the tone of these lines? The tone is informal, humorous, and imaginative. Another example: a poem should be silent as the sleeve-worn stone of casement ledges where the moss has grown. Okay, and the word details are sleeve-worn stone, casement ledges where the moss has grown, and the tone is, let's see if they have the same tones. Okay, the tone is formal, serious, poetic, and imaginative. Now try to compare these two. Okay, both writers approach their subjects with an imaginative attitude, right? However, Cope takes a playful, amusing tone toward Shakespeare, and in contrast, MacLeish takes a serious, formal tone toward defining what a poem should be. Right? Let's try to identify the examples of imagery in the lines of this poem. Then let's try to complete the chart later, okay? So let's read. A poem should be equal to, not true, For all the history of grief, an empty doorway and a maple leaf. Alright, so let's try to fill in this table. Okay, what does the imagery describe in this poem? Let's try. It is a poem is compared to an empty doorway and a maple leaf. Okay, so that's the imagery here. Now, what is the speaker's message in this poem? Alright, so even if a poem's themes are dark and tragic, for all the history of grief, that's an example, the poem should still be as self-contained as an empty doorway and a maple leaf. Now let's try to reread Ars Poetica. Why is the tone of the poem effective? The poem's tone shows the author's attitude toward the poem's subject. In this case, the tone is serious and formal, but it is also imaginative. This makes the poem surprising and engaging, while also conveying a serious message about what a poem is. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Your task will be sent in your eAlpha account.